am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Melisa Galasso, the founder and CEO of Galasso Learning Solutions. She is a CPA with over 15 years of experience in the accounting profession. She designs and facilitates courses in advanced technical accounting and auditing topics. On a personal level, Melisa enjoys traveling, watching her daughter ride her horse, and spending quality time with her family. During my interview with Melisa, we discussed how she transformed from being a perfectionist and believing she needed to do everything alone to learning that asking for help is not a weakness, but a strength. Welcome to this edition of the Breaking Beliefs podcast. And today I'm with Melisa Galasso. She is the chair of the Professional Women's Conference for the North Carolina CPA Society, but she's also a prolific speaker. And she does all sorts of topics that might sound uninteresting, but she does them completely interesting. So I'm very excited to talk to her today. And Melisa, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Sure. So my name is Melisa Galasso. I own a training firm called Galasso Learning Solutions, and we specialize in very technical accounting and auditing topics.
We like what?
Yellow book, leases, the really exciting things, but the things people need to be able to do in order to serve their clients better. So I work with CPA firms to help them understand the standard in a way that's practical so that they can then apply it on their clients.
Yeah. And I was telling her, every other speaker I've seen besides her is reading right off a PowerPoint and putting themselves asleep sometimes. So
that's not my style.
Yeah, she really makes these topics interesting, which is fun. So highly recommend you.
Well, thank you.
So just to start off, kind of just want to talk about your journey. What did you want to be when you grew up? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I think it's really funny. I have always, thinking back to my childhood, super competitive in the academic world, not on the sports side at all, but super competitive.
You have to know our strengths.
We know our strengths. That was not the sporting area for me, but, just even growing up, I always, had that big dream. I wanted to do something big or important. And, many times I had a very fortunate to see lots of women get into positions of power when I was growing up, and I always just I knew I wanted to do something important. I never thought I was going to be a CPA. That was not on the list.
So what were you seeing? What were you considering power important at that age?
I'll remember in elementary school when Hillary Clinton became first lady.
Yeah.
Right? So at that point, I remember that, and I wrote a whole article and stories about her and how she was important. And, even throughout the years, all of my essays and articles and things like that, even through college, really focused on powerful women. And I think that has been a theme for me for a long time.
Yeah. So what was it you intended to do besides being a CPA?
I was definitely going to be president at one point in time. Yeah. So I think all little girls, I hope all little girls want to be president. Yeah. So that was definitely good. And then at one point, definitely wanted to be a big CEO of some fancy company and just be in charge of everyone. That's it. I wanted to be in charge. So a typical oldest child type of I want to rule the world, and I was going to do that. So
I remember doing those job placement tests in high school, and when you look up what kind of jobs, and I saw the CEO, I was like, oh, that works. Well, then when I actually took the personality test, the only job that came up was tattoo artist.
What? No way. You're so accurate.
And then I had to sit back and I'm I'm artistic and then very exact. Mm-hmm. And really, that's a hard combination. Okay, so it kind of makes sense, but.
Oh yeah, it's that balance. I really love technical accounting, but I like working with people. And that's something that people like, I've been introduced at Christmas parties and like, oh, what do you do? And I said, I'm a CPA. And they're like, no way. You couldn't be a CPA. I'm like, no, I swear I'm licensed 15 years. I mean, I've done this thing. And they're like, you just don't have the personality. I'm like, you just have the wrong stereotype of what we,
and I think that's what we're trying to change out there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, we're being at the Professional Women's Conference. That's what we're trying to really do, is to embrace the, we don't have to be cookie cutter. We can be our own person and really grow.
Right. So how did you end up becoming an accountant?
So I applied to Georgetown University. It was my first choice. I applied early action and I was accepted. And when I was applying for school, the one thing that my mom said, she goes, you can go to any school you want, but when you graduate, you better be able to pay for yourself. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. So like that was her only thing. And my family I'd be the first to go to college and get a bachelor's degree. So in my immediate family. And
so what did your mom do?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She did some odd jobs here and there, but never like worked for a profession or career. And so it was one of those things like that, I never really, I was like, wouldn't probably know what an accountant was when I was, in high school or things like that. It wasn't something I was looking for.
What did your dad do?
He actually worked in a hospital in a more like clerical type setting.
Okay.
So it was,
So where did the drive from powerful, how did that shift within you?
It's really funny. I think it's because I'm not close with my dad at all. We haven't talked in decades. I didn't even let him come to my wedding. Like it's not close at all. But he was always of the women should be in the right place. You're just going to get married. You don't need to go to college type of personality, which is so dated given that I'm so young. Like that just didn't ever resonate with me. And I was like, you know what? I always saw it as like a challenge. Like I'm just going to show you one day. And it's funny because my mom tells a story about when I was little. And I guess I was told I had to clean my room. And I said, one day I'm going to have someone who cleans my rooms for me. And she goes, and I'm not kidding. Like that was like the one thing that like, as soon as we got married, the first thing we did was hire someone to come in. And I was like, because I said, I am not going to be the one to clean this house. And that to me, so I always saw it as sort of a challenge that I was going to be different. I was going to have a different experience. And it, I think to some extent, overcoming that was very important, was to be like, okay, so my circumstances are not perfect, but I'm going to,
you have to believe in yourself.
And
at the end of the day.
I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm still recovering. So that was one thing for me, was that I had to.
It's that control thing.
Yes. I can control this if I do everything perfect and I do it and I take responsibility for it, and it like serious over perfectionism. My senior year, I took 8 AP courses.
Oh my goodness.
I took AP French Lit, AP Spanish Lit, and AP English Lit my senior year.
Oh my gosh.
AP Government and AP Economics. AP Calc and AP Statistics. Like there was no life to be had, but it was because I was like, well, I'm just going to take everything. Like I took every course that was offered, and then it was just about overcoming that and being, I can do it.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think, I have definitely had those tendencies where I feel like, well, I'm proving something by doing all of that. So what broke it?
I think my biggest thing was I always thought it had to be me, that I couldn't ask for help. And I never wanted anyone to know I ever struggled. Like it had to look easy and it had to look perfect. Like it was a huge issue for me growing up. Like when I took my driving test, I didn't tell a single friend I was taking it, because if I didn't pass, I didn't want them to know I failed my driver's test. And that was like that all through high school. And all through my early career, it was that I wanted to look perfect and to look like I had it. And finally, I was miserable, and I had gotten to the point where I was unhappy and I didn't really have the tribe that I would want. And I was looking to find something different. And I finally decided that maybe I should just ask for help.
That's hard. That's a hard realization.
It was really hard for me because it was something like I doubted that it was, if I asked for help, then it's not my achievement.
Right. And so who did you ask for help?
I actually went to a career coach, and she ended up really changing my thought process, and she challenged me to think differently. And I never thought I'd go out on my own and open a company, like super risk averse type of personality. And she just really challenged my thinking, and then asking for help there kind of just started bubbling up around the same time. I started to get more involved with women's groups and things like that, because now I was going out on my own. I knew nothing about what that was going to look like.
Right.
And I started asking for more help. And then I started to learn that there's this whole tribe out there, people who want to support you. And it was like life-changing for me because it was always about, I had to do it. I could not rely on anyone else. And if I didn't do it myself, then it wasn't real. It wasn't authentic.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of a story with my kids, because really our kids have that figured out. So if you watch them play video games, well, I call them video games again. This dates me. But they're playing on an app, and I was watching my son trying to get to this next level, and he wasn't getting it, so he passed it to his cousin, and his cousin got him to the next level, and then he went back and started playing, and I'm like, I used to spend hours and hours with Pac-Man. So how
to overcome it. Like, had to.
I would have never given it to somebody else. And I went to him and I said, so do you feel like you got to that next level?
Did you earn that?
And he did. And it's just a different mindset, that you actually become better with the people around you, than trying to, and asking to say, well, I've got this weakness, how did you do it? Or, where you can share and help each other, because it's usually a two-way street.
And what I have found is that when you help others and others help you, it becomes this sort of agreement, and it's grown. And I've been involved now in different women's groups over time, and the vulnerability of sharing and asking for help and talking about, and it's interesting that we've gotten to this point, because I know growing up that would have been like, just such an awkward, why do you need help? Why can't you do this on your own? And to see women out there and conferences designed to help women get where they want to go. So the career coach, what got you there? Because that would have been a huge break in your belief system to go do that. So what happened? I was tired. I was exhausted. I was miserable. And I had literally run out of ideas. And what was kind of funny is I think sort of fate had played a part. The person was a former CPA who was just starting her coaching practice. And we had casually talked about it at some meeting that I'd overlapped at a CPA profession conference or meeting. And she's like, I'm going out on my own. I want to start this career thing, and I'm going to coach people. And I was like, that sounds really nice. I was like, that's great. I mean,
good career.
Yeah. I'm like, you're a partner at a CPA firm, and okay, now you're going to become a coach. And it never clicked for me. And then I was just sort of sitting there, and it was right before the holidays, and I'll never forget it. I was just sitting there going, I am so tired and so miserable. And she seems like such a nice person that even if we don't make any progress,
she'll be a good friend.
She'll, if someone just to talk to, because my husband is incredibly supportive, but to some extent I was I just didn't know what my options were. Like being in public accounting, I had done public accounting, I had done work in industry, I had done work in internal audit. And every time there was something missing. And, there was a session at the conference today called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. And that topic really resonated with me, because what ended up happening is every time I changed jobs, it was never the right fit. And I couldn't figure out why I kept going to different locations. And for the first 10 years of my career, I literally, at the longest I had spent anywhere was just a handful of years, 2-3 max. And I was like, why can't I find it? I love accounting. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? And she's like, well, you just keep going for the same wrong fit. And that realization, I'm like, well, I'm just trying to do this. And she was like, no,
that's not your strong point. Yeah.
She's like, why are you trying to fit into this? That's just not who you are. And she did DISC assessments and all these other assessments. And she's like, this is where you shine. And I was like, well, I could never open up my own company. I can't do that. I can't. Yeah. And she's like, well, what's the first step? And I'll never forget that. I said, I don't even know how to start up an LLC. And she goes, your homework today, because we had homework after every meeting, is to go read the State Board of Accountants or the State Board rules on setting this up and come back and tell me. And
I bet you can figure it out with all the technical knowledge.
It was one paragraph. It was a page long. I was like, okay, I can't even come back and say I don't know how to. I was like, well, I'm going to say I can't afford a lawyer, or I'm going to have some reason.
It's amazing how many excuses will throw up.
Yeah, and it wasn't needed. I literally, it took me. And so we started meeting about probably November, and I had an LLC by February.
Yeah.
So, like it took the work.
And I think it takes those moments of pause. Even when she told you were the coach, you're like, oh, nice. I don't know who would need a coach. And then the next day you're like, can I have you as a coach? Like sometimes it's when we step away from a situation that we actually realize like, oh, like there's some truth in that.
And I think sometimes it's just hard to see yourself. Like,
you need that third party observer.
Because she'd say things and I'm like, well, it does sound like me, but I don't, that's not how I picture me. And it was really cool. And then from there, I just started having the opportunity to, I'd won an award for a women's conference. And so, and the conference didn't run the following year. And I was like, I want to do this. And I had met a girl, and literally we were at a business lunch. We were the only women at the table. And so of course we sat near each other. Right. And it was this big, long lunch. And we started talking, and she goes, I think I met you before. And I'm like, I don't remember. And we kind of figured out where it was. And I said, one day I really want to start a women's initiative here in Charlotte. And she said, I've always wanted to do that. And like within 6 months, we had a booming women's initiative that's now been replicated all over the place. But working together on that initial item and like going back and forth on the struggles that we both had, it totally changed my point of view on how that would work, and that you can talk to someone about, you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to have all the answers. So why did you choose accounting? Because I liked that my debits equaled my credits and my trial balance. And I knew if I got the answer right, it was perfect. It's perfect. Like, like my senior year, I took consolidations, and it was a take-home test. And I knew when I turned it in that everything had tied out and it was perfect. What they don't tell you in college is that you spend almost all of your time in the shades of gray. Yeah, exactly. It's never the black and white. And as the profession moves towards things like a principles-based approach and less rules, you see it in people when I'm teaching. They're like, I just want you to tell me what to do. And I'm like, well, what's your gut saying? They're like, we don't make decisions with our gut. I'm like, oh no, now we do. Yeah, I actually had that. I was on a panel at a conference about a year ago. And I was talking about how it's very hard, like from a technology perspective, to document process, because in the SaaS world, there's, 1,000 changes a year in every one software. So where there were all these written procedures, it's very hard. And there was a guy pushing on me and saying, we have to have rules. I'm like, we have to have a framework. And it has to be something that's moving and changing. So you got fences, but you're going to run around in it, and you're going to have to find your best path to, get to those answers. And the way the world is changing, breaks that perfectionist piece of what people loved maybe when they were going into it. And I think there's no definite answer. Yeah, when you're like, you can have a lease and it can be 5 years or 10 or 15 or 20 or 25, and you get to decide. They're like, no, there has to be a right answer. I'm like, there isn't a right answer. It's professional judgment. And the more we add professional judgment to the standards, you can see it, people cringing. They're like, no, like take it back. I want to go back to my rules. I want to go back to having the right answer. And that's totally why I went into accounting. Like, I loved the fact that I knew when I turned something in, it was good. It was perfect. I was getting that A, and I was completely opposite. Nothing was turning out for me. That's how come I teach leases. I'm like, I went after my first accounting 101 test. I went to the teaching assistant. I'm like, this is supposed to be my career. He's like, you'll hang this test up one day. I'm like, okay. But it's one of those things. But you find your path. And that's the cool thing about the profession that's what it is. I find for like freshman accounting in particular, you have, because I actually taught freshman accounting at Georgetown for a number of years. And you have F's. Well, that's it. You have F's and you have A's. You either it clicks or it's like, well, I just kept thinking of it like a bank statement. I could not flip the debits and credits in my head. It wasn't. But you had been exposed to something ahead of time. Well, I had to reconcile my checkbook from the time I was 12 years old. So way to go, Mom. Like, that's it. Like, right there. So there you go. That's what screwed me up. So it's like, hold on. You had been really good at working with banks. You missed your opportunity. Like, I can't see this until I started co-oping.
co-oping changed everything for me. Because once I could visualize what we were doing, then I'm like, oh, I can do the mechanics underneath. But I got to understand the end game.
Well, and I think that's to anything. Like, I think that's what makes accounting really interesting, is that it tells a story. And I think people forget that it's more than the numbers, because it was just the numbers, computers would replace us, but it's the story it tells and the analysis that we offer that changes how the profession moves forward. And what we liked, I loved the numbers. And then I'm like, well, tell me the story. And I'm like, it's numbers. And today I look back and I'm like, oh, there's so much more than
So how did you figure that out?
I honestly think it was a lot of trial and error. Like, when I started, debits and credits and auditing and ticking and tying. And then over the years, the further you move up the chain, the less and less you do that. And the more you spend in those shades of gray, and
clients asking you questions that you don't know.
Yeah. And I always, to me, I'm like, bring those questions, but I don't know everything. And if you email me, I'm happy to get back to you. And that's always what I say in the classroom, is like, I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you point blank, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to go research it for you.
Well, and I think that's a really, I just pause on that, because I talk about this a lot, is that's a skill you have to practice. Because it's not easy to tell someone you don't know.
Especially if you want to be perfect.
But right, exactly. So if you have that belief system inside of you, you're disappointing yourself. You're actually not disappointing the other person. Like, if someone said that to you, you'd be like, okay, well, when are you going to get back to me? As long as you get back to me, I don't know how to research that answer, but you do. And that's where we have to, change how we value something. So what made that flip? Did you get to a breaking point on some question? You're like, oh, I'm stuck. I'm forced in a corner.
I couldn't put it on like a particular area, but what happens over the years is that when you're in charge, so eventually I would go to become an assistant controller, and I have all these different groups reporting to me, and you're sitting there trying to figure out, and you're like, this should be so easy. Like,
why am I here till midnight and it's still not working?
Why can't I close this? And then you're like, why is this not posting? And you're like, your journal entry doesn't balance. And you're like, no. And then eventually over time you realize that in the real world, nothing works quite like that. And it's great in theory. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of education, is the practical element. It's great to talk about theoretical, but when you leave there, do you have a to-do list of what you're going to do next? Or you're like, great, that's great, but I don't even have the first starting point. And so, because in the real world, nothing goes according to plan.
No.
Even though I wanted it to journal entries to balance and debits to equal credits and audits to work out. It's one of those things that it's hard to switch that over, especially if you go in because everything's perfect. And it's a great profession for that as a student.
Well, and if I go back in your story, you talked about that you don't talk to your father and you push forward, and then you come into, hard business situations and you push forward. And I think there's something inside of us that we need to give attention to and credit to that keeps us moving forward when things get hard, whether that's in our personal life, whether that's in our business life. But those things that happen over our lifetime actually become these patterns that work in our benefit and against us.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I do think perseverance is one of those things, like it has to be an answer. You have to get something done. You can't not.
And you can't give up.
Yeah. Like
because someone's got to get it done.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that women excel at, is like, at the end of the day, we're like, okay, this has to get done. So what can we do to get there? And it's a little bit easier to compromise when you're just trying to, get an end result.
So what's changed in your belief systems now that you're an entrepreneur? So going from a salary job to, very predictable type work to what you do now?
I totally believe one of the biggest belief systems is that you really do know your area and that you can't do it alone. So my first year as an entrepreneur, I did all my own travel, all my own invoices, all my own crap, all of my own. And then I was like, this is insane. And I would talk to people and they're like, why are you doing that? And so I joined NAWBO and I joined various groups, and they'd be like, you just need to learn to delegate. And I'm like, well, I do it the best. I do it. If I do it, I know it's going to be right. And they're like, yes, but then you also won't sleep. Like eventually. And so it got to the point where I would listen to like really successful people be like, oh, I don't do that. And I'm like, you don't? And then they're like, oh no, that, that gets outsourced and that gets outsourced. And I'm like, at home, I'm like that. Home, I'm like, oh, I need to do that. Like I hired someone to come and change my cat litter because I didn't like to do it.
Exactly.
I'm like, oh, I can find someone to do this cheaper than me. So
I really like my cat, so I don't want to have to get rid of my cat. So
I just like to change cat litter. And it was one of those things that my husband and I would argue over. And I'm like, I Googled it, and there was a woman who did outdoors for the dogs. And I said, would you come indoors and do cats? And she goes, oh, I don't see why not. So she came 3 times a week and changed the cat litter. And I'm like, at home, I was really good.
What a delight.
And it was great. Like,
but you both probably felt better.
We did.
Getting it done. You're not fighting over it.
Yeah. There's no arguments over cat litter or why does this smell? And then you're like, But at home, I was great at it.
Yeah.
But at work, I was terrible at it. And I was like, and then I would listen to these like people and I'm like, oh, I'm so admire their business and how they've grown it. And they're like, well, I didn't grow it by myself. Like I didn't give it away. And I'm like, it made sense intuitively. Mm-hmm. But it took a lot for me to be like, I need to do that too.
Yeah.
And like the first time I wrote a job description to give work to someone else, I was like, I don't even know, like, I know what seat I want to sit in on the airplane. So my travel and like, how do I give this up? And I think that has been for me, like the building up and giving things out each year, little by little. So it definitely has not been like, I just miraculously gave up stuff I shouldn't.
Yeah.
I should have done.
Now, could you ever go back?
No.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to book another flight ever again.
Well, and I think there's something to be said too, because when we are a perfectionist, we put that on the other people around us. And when we decide to delegate, we have to provide them with what is the end result we want them to get to, but we can't provide them all the steps to get there because they're going to find their way to get to the same endpoint. And if we try to micromanage every step, then we're actually paying someone else and doing it.
Yeah. And then that's, the first few times I was like, actually, I'll just have you save the airfare and then you'll send to me and I'll approve it. And then I would go and reprice out the airfare. And I'm like,
why am I doing this?
Why? I was like, I wanted to make sure it was like the right selection of times and everything. And then I was finally like, this is just not the best use of my time.
Right.
And when I started seeing like my calendar would just appear and I would have like, I'm like, I have an airplane to get on and it's already taken care of. But I think when you aren't ready for someone to help you and you're afraid to ask for it, and you're a super perfectionist that wants it to be perfect, it's hard to delegate out. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you want to grow, then you have to let something go. And that took a lot for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category: family and friends, health, spiritual, or money.
Family and friends.
Okay. So things or actions I don't have that I want.
More time. So I travel typically 3 days a week. And so sometimes I miss that chorus concert or I have to sort of adjust because I don't have the timing for it. So for me, I would love to see just a little bit more time in the week to be able to spend that time. And I do make a good attempt at it, but just a little bit more time would make a difference.
Yeah. Okay. So things or actions I do have that I want.
I am really grateful for the relationship I have with my daughter. She's 12 and everyone's like, just you wait, 12 is going to be a horror story. She's going to hate you and never talk to you. And I still get hugs. And like for her birthday, she asked me to still come to middle school and bring her brownies and everything. And people were like, no way. And I'm like, but we have that like bond. And it's definitely something, she's an only, but it's to me like that is, I'm super happy that we've developed that relationship. And I know, I don't know what's to come. I can't predict the future, but right now I'm still happy that I haven't, seen that material twist.
Right. Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want.
I think for me, it's that inauthentic relationships. Everyone is, I've been really lucky. I don't have a ton of friends and I don't have, a ton of interactions, but with the people that I do, it's been pretty awesome. Like everyone is all in. My husband's all in, my daughter's all in, my friends are all in. And it's that really nice feeling.
Yeah. That someone's in your corner. Last, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Calendar appointments on weekends and, things that I need to find a way to
giving yourself more space.
Give me more space.
Entrepreneur problem.
Exactly. Like just a couple more extra hours every day and a couple more extra weekends would be great.
Yeah.
My calendar, sometimes when I look at it, it scares me.
Oh yeah. So. People hate opening mine. They're like, I'm like, actually it makes sense to me, but like.
I get it. Yeah. Why don't you understand my color coding? And
exactly. I'm my color coded.
I can do 4 different time zones in 1 week. Why are you doubting me? I got this.
So is there any message that you want to make sure people take away from this conversation and anything you want them to know about your business?
Sure. I think the one thing is that if I can be a recovering perfectionist, then anybody can, and that if I can ask for help, anybody can, because it took a lot to be able to get there. But now I have some of the closest friends from letting people in and letting them see me when I wasn't perfect, and actually developing stronger friendships from it. Yeah. In terms of the business, obviously reach out on LinkedIn or go to our website. And, we do have a lot of different types. GalassoLearningsolutions.com. It's a very creative, creative website.
As CPA sites are.
We tend to make things up really well.
And that will all be in the notes. So you can find Melisa for your CPE needs.
Absolutely.
So great. Well, thank you so much for being on and having this conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Now it's time for us to reflect during our Mindful Moments segment of this part of the podcast on the interview that I had with Melisa. And I think from talking to Melisa and her going over her journey, so many people go through this exact same journey of starting out in our careers and academics, being super competitive, and wanting to make sure all of our wins are our own and not realizing that we actually need a team to help create our best successes rather than trying to go it alone. And just by stepping back and pausing and reviewing your life and understanding what things we have to let go of is really important. And Melisa talked about how she actually, started not enjoying her work anymore, not enjoying the things that she was doing. And when you step back and realize, what, I ultimately want to be having the career that I have, what things did I need to do to pivot to make sure that I can accomplish the outcomes that I want without getting burned out? And part of her journey was learning to relinquish control, and that wasn't a weakness. And getting involved with groups such as other women's groups and networking groups that you could find support in the work that you're doing, because when you help others, they help you, and it just starts being a multiplier rather than feeling like it's actually reducing the amount of success that you have if you reach out for help. And I think it was really poignant when she talked about that she experienced this vulnerability of sharing best practices, things that people struggled with, once she decided to relinquish that control and become part of these groups and support one another. And that vulnerability, when we all become more human with one another, we start learning things that not only help us, but help the people that we're with. So that way we don't feel like it's a weakness, that we are being additive as well. Another important thing that she talked about was having a career coach and understanding that that's not a weakness, that basically it's this third-party observer that can look at your career, your life, your work, without any skin in the game, that they can look at that and say things to you in black and white without having the feeling or emotion that you're going through every day. And if you're open to that advice, it can really start changing the trajectory that you're on. Now, she talked about a few tips about making sure that as you move forward, that you relinquish this control and that you don't do it alone. And first off is really learning to delegate. And I think that goes hand in hand with not micromanaging, that we have to realize that as human beings, that we all have a different way to get to an outcome, but that doesn't mean the path there is any less than another path. That if we all get to the same outcome, then we should be happy that somebody else was able to help us get to the outcome that we wanted. So in order to do that, we have to be able to allow someone else to learn in order to delegate tasks so that we can have the delight of things like she talked about her travel being taken care of, instead of trying to micromanage that somebody books your travel and then you go back and review the travel and do it all over again. Then it really wasn't worth it to have someone do that. And if you feel that are certain tasks that people are doing that you're having to re-review, then find different ones that you don't have as much stake in the game in getting those done. And if somebody does it, you don't need to look over their shoulder. The other thing that she talked about was not being able to grow by yourself, and that it becomes really important, the group that you have, but also the support that you decide to invest in around yourself or open up to make sure that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. So all in all, I think this was a really important moment for us all to step back and review where in our life are we holding on too tight with too much control, and understanding that you can recover from that if you're open to it. But it's a process, it's a journey, and it's work. But asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.